Dim the lights, lean back, and tonight, let's dive into the depths of the ancient world. If you wish to wander further into the mysterious echoes of the past, consider subscribing to join our journey through time, far beyond the noise of the modern age, beyond glowing cities, humming machines, and restless clocks. There was once a world illuminated only by firelight, moonlight, and the endless shimmer of the sea. A world where love moved more slowly, where longing drifted through marble streets like incense carried on a midnight breeze, where the human heart, fragile and yearning, searched for meaning beneath the watchful eyes of ancient gods. Tonight, we travel there together to ancient Greece, to a land of white stone temples resting against violet mountains, of olive groves whispering beneath warm Mediterranean winds, of distant islands floating like dreams upon the dark blue waters of the Aegean Sea. And as the night deepens around you, allow yourself to wander gently through this forgotten world. Imagine the hour just after sunset. The heat of the day still lingers softly upon the stone pathways. The marble walls of homes and temples continue to radiate warmth gathered beneath the afternoon sun. Cicadas sing endlessly from hidden fig trees. Somewhere in the distance, waves fold themselves lazily against a harbor lined with wooden fishing boats. The sky above Athens glows with fading colors, amber melting into rose, rose dissolving into deep indigo. Oil lamps begin to flicker awake one by one. Golden halos bloom behind linen curtains, voices soften, footsteps slow, and the ancient city exhales. The marketplace, the agora, which only hours before overflowed with shouting merchants, clattering pottery, and the scent of fresh bread, now begins to empty beneath the cooling evening air. A fruit seller gathers figs into woven baskets. An old poet rolls closed a weathered scroll. Young apprentices sweep dust from the thresholds of workshops. The smell of crushed olives, sea salt, warm clay, cedarwood smoke, and sweet wine lingers gently in the air. And somewhere among these quieting streets, two strangers are about to fall in love. Not with the speed of modern romance, not through hurried words or fleeting glances, but slowly, carefully, like the lighting of a sacred flame. Because in ancient Greece, love was not merely an emotion, it was a force, a mystery, a kind of divine madness gifted or inflicted by the gods themselves. The Greeks believed love could alter destiny. It could inspire poetry, begin wars, destroy kingdoms, awaken philosophers, or send lonely souls wandering sleepless beneath moonlit porticos. To love someone was to surrender to something ancient and unknowable, something larger than yourself. And tonight, as the world grows quieter around you, we will step gently into their stories. We will wander through hidden courtyards perfumed with jasmine. We will stand beside flickering temple fires dedicated to Aphrodite, goddess of desire. We will listen to whispered poems drifting across island shores. We will watch garlands of myrtle being laid silently upon doorsteps beneath the stars. And together, we will uncover how people fell in love in ancient Greece. So breathe slowly now. Allow the ancient world to gather around you like a warm night breeze. Listen to the distant murmur of the sea, to the soft crackling of torchlight, to the quiet rhythm of sandals brushing against worn stone roads, polished smooth by countless forgotten lives. The hour grows late. The stars are appearing above the Parthenon, and somewhere in the sleeping heart of Greece, a golden apple waits patiently in the palm of a trembling hand. The evening arrived slowly over the city of Athens, not suddenly, but like dark blue ink, spreading gently through water. The final warmth of the sun rested upon the rooftops and marble columns, painting them with fading gold. Long shadows stretched across narrow streets where merchants had spent the day calling out prices for olives, honey, dyed cloth, and delicate painted pottery brought from distant islands. The agora was quieter now. Only remnants of the day remained. A bent old man carefully stacked clay cups onto wooden shelves. A young servant swept grapeskins and dust into small drifting piles. Somewhere nearby, laughter echoed briefly from a tavern before dissolving into the evening air. Above it all, swallows circled lazily through the violet sky. and from beyond the city walls came the scent of olive trees warmed by the dying light of day. The Mediterranean evening possessed a softness difficult to describe. The air itself seemed gentler there. Sea breeze moved slowly through the streets, carrying traces of salt water and wild herbs from distant hillsides. Lavender and thyme grew between pale stones along quiet pathways. Torches had begun to flicker awake beside doorways, their flames trembling softly in the dusk like living gold. And through this deepening twilight walked a young man named Theron. His pace was unhurried, his sandals brushed softly against the worn stone road as he moved through the city, passing beneath hanging linen cloths and balconies draped with ivy. In his hand he carried an apple, not an ordinary apple purchased casually from a market stall. This apple had been chosen with extraordinary care. Earlier that morning, before sunrise, Theron had traveled beyond the city, toward a small orchard, resting beside the silver-green hills of Attica. Dew still clung to the grass there. The world had been silent, except for distant birdsong and the rustling of leaves moving in the dawn breeze. The orchard keeper, an elderly woman with weathered hands and thoughtful eyes, had watched him quietly as he searched among the trees. He rejected many apples before finding the right one. Some were too small, some too pale, some imperfectly shaped, but eventually, hidden beneath a canopy of leaves glowing softly beneath the early sun, he discovered it. Round, golden red, its skin smooth as polished marble. When he lifted it carefully into his hand, cool droplets of morning dew slid across his fingers, and for a long moment he simply stared at it. Because in ancient Greece, the giving of an apple carried meaning deeper than simple affection. It was not merely a gift, it was a confession, a silent declaration, a ritual older than memory itself. To offer an apple was to say, "I desire you," not for a passing moment, but truly. The ancient Greeks understood symbolism intimately. The world around them breathed with hidden meanings. Olive branches symbolized peace. Myrtle belonged to Aphrodite. Torches represented sacred union and transformation. And apples belonged to longing, to temptation, to love. Some whispered that this tradition echoed from even older myths. The golden apple of discord cast among the gods, the fruit associated with Aphrodite herself, the sweetness and danger of desire intertwined together. Theron knew these stories well. Every Greek child did. Yet tonight, mythology felt distant compared to the trembling uncertainty within his chest. Because the apple was not intended for a goddess. It was intended for a woman named Lyra. He had seen her many times before, never closely, never properly, only in fragments, like glimpses of a dream. Once near the fountain house at midday, where women gathered with painted clay vessels to collect water. He remembered how sunlight reflected from the surface of the water onto her face, scattering moving patterns across her skin. Another time beneath the shaded colonnade near the agora, where she paused briefly beside a flower seller, arranging white narcissus blossoms into small woven garlands. And once, most vividly of all, during a religious procession honoring Athena. The streets had been crowded that day. Incense smoke drifted through the city. Musicians played slow melodies upon reed flutes. Young girls carried woven baskets filled with barley and flower petals. Theron remembered almost none of it, only her, walking quietly among the crowd in pale blue linen, dark hair braided loosely with olive leaves, eyes lowered, as if untouched by the noise around her. Since then, something restless had awakened inside him, not violent, not consuming, simply persistent, like a tide returning endlessly to shore. And now, beneath the descending evening sky, he moved through Athens, carrying the ancient symbol of his longing in the palm of his hand. The apple felt heavier than it should have. Its smooth skin caught the torchlight as he walked. Golden, warm, fragile. At last, Theron reached the quieter residential streets beyond the busy marketplace. Here the city changed. The noise faded into distant murmurs. Homes stood close together, their whitewashed walls glowing softly beneath torchlight. Small shrines rested beside certain doorways, tiny offerings left for household gods. The scent of baking bread drifted through open courtyards. Somewhere nearby, someone played a lyre softly enough that the music seemed woven into the night itself. Theron slowed his steps. His heart beat harder now. He knew which doorway belonged to her family. He had memorized it long ago, a modest home framed by climbing ivy and a small clay lantern hanging beside the entrance. Light glowed faintly from within. For a long moment, he stood motionless across the street. The city around him continued breathing quietly. Sandals passed occasionally over stone. A cat slipped silently through shadow. A breeze stirred the hanging olive branches overhead, but within Theron, time seemed suspended. He looked down at the apple again. Its surface reflected the trembling torchlight, and suddenly, all the uncertainty of human longing gathered inside that single object. What if she refused? What if she laughed? What if the gesture itself, so simple, so wordless, failed entirely? Ancient love often unfolded through silence rather than speech. A glance, a flower, a touch of fingertips, a fruit left waiting beneath moonlight. And perhaps that made such moments feel even more terrifying, because silence leaves room for hope, and hope can make the heart unbearably vulnerable. Theron crossed the street slowly. The warm night air brushed gently against his skin. Somewhere far away, beyond the sleeping city, waves rolled endlessly against dark shores. He reached the doorway. The clay lantern above him flickered softly. Then, with extraordinary care, he placed the apple upon the doorstep. Nothing more, no note, no name, only the fruit itself glowing faintly red gold beneath the torchlight. A sacred offering of desire. For a moment he remained there, listening. Inside the house came the faint sound of voices, the clinking of pottery. Then footsteps, soft footsteps approaching slowly from within. Theron stepped back instinctively into shadow beneath the ivy-covered wall. The wooden door opened gently, and there she was, Lyra. For one suspended heartbeat, neither moved. The torch beside the doorway illuminated her face with warm amber light. Her dark hair rested loosely upon her shoulders now, no longer braided as it had been during the procession months earlier. Sleepy evening stillness lingered in her expression, then her eyes lowered toward the apple. The world seemed to quiet completely. No marketplace, no distant sea, no whispering wind. Only this moment. She understood immediately. Of course she did. Everyone in Greece understood the meaning of the apple. Her fingers moved slowly toward it, and when she lifted it into her hands, the torchlight revealed its color against her pale skin, like a piece of captured sunset. Then, gently, almost imperceptibly, she looked upward, toward the shadows, toward him. Their eyes met, and in ancient Greece, sometimes that was enough to begin an entire lifetime of longing. Neither spoke. Words would have shattered the fragile beauty of the moment. Instead, they remained suspended within silence while the night deepened around them. The breeze carried the scent of olives and sea salt through the narrow street. Torch flames flickered softly. Far above the rooftops, stars emerged one by one over the ancient world. And there, beneath the endless heavens of Greece, a simple golden apple passed silently from one trembling hand into another. Night settled differently over ancient Greece than it does over the modern world. Darkness was not interrupted by electric light, or distant highways, or glowing windows stretching endlessly into the horizon. Instead, the ancient night arrived softly, patiently, carrying with it a profound and almost sacred stillness. As the moon climbed above the hills of Attica, Athens transformed. The daytime heat faded slowly from the marble streets. Torches flickered beside doorways like small earthly stars. Oil lamps glowed behind linen curtains, their warm amber light spilling gently into narrow alleyways scented with olive wood smoke and crushed herbs. The city grew quieter with every passing hour. Merchants vanished from the agora. Potters closed their workshops. The sound of sandals against stone became rare and distant. Only certain souls remained awake now. Philosophers wandering beneath moonlit colonnades, temple keepers tending sacred fires, fishermen preparing boats before dawn, and lovers, especially lovers, because the night belonged to longing. It belonged to the ache of unfinished conversations, to silent yearning, to hearts too restless for sleep. And among the many strange and beautiful rituals of ancient Greek romance, there was one tradition especially filled with melancholy and tenderness. The Greeks called it the paraklasithyron, the lament beside the doorway. Imagine it now, a quiet street beneath silver moonlight, the city asleep, and outside a closed door stands someone hopelessly in love, waiting, hoping, speaking softly into the darkness, while the beloved remains hidden within. The ritual was both poetic and painfully human. Young men would linger outside the homes of those they adored, sometimes singing softly beneath windows, sometimes whispering prayers to Aphrodite, sometimes simply remaining there in silence while the night deepened around them, not demanding entry, not forcing themselves upon the moment, only existing near the person they longed for, as though closeness itself could soothe the ache of desire. And on one such night, beneath a moon pale as polished ivory, Theron found himself wandering once more toward the ivy-covered doorway of Lyra's home. Several days had passed since the golden apple, several slow, dreamlike days filled with uncertainty. He had seen her only once since then, briefly, at the edge of the agora. She had been selecting figs from a woven basket, while an elderly vendor spoke gently about the coming harvest season. Theron passed nearby, pretending not to notice her. Yet he noticed everything: the way sunlight touched the loose strands of dark hair near her face, the calm rhythm of her movements, the small olive-green ribbon tied around her wrist. And then, for the briefest moment, she looked toward him. Not accidentally, not vaguely, directly. A glance so fleeting it almost seemed imagined. Yet it followed him for the remainder of the day, like perfume lingering upon linen cloth. Now the city slept beneath moonlight, and still he could not quiet his thoughts. The streets before him glowed faintly silver blue beneath the night sky. Marble walls reflected pale lunar light. Somewhere far away, dogs barked lazily near the city gates before silence returned once more. Theron moved slowly through the sleeping streets. He carried no apple tonight, no gift, only himself. The warm Mediterranean wind drifted gently through Athens, carrying the scent of cypress trees and distant seawater. The Acropolis rose silently above the city, like a dream carved from stone, its temples glowing faintly beneath the stars. Everything felt ancient, endless, as though the world itself had grown quiet enough to hear the movements of the human heart. When Theron finally reached Lyra's street, he paused. The same clay lantern hung beside the doorway. Its flame burned low now, trembling softly in the darkness. Ivy leaves stirred overhead. He looked toward the closed wooden door, and for a long time, he simply stood there. This was the strange beauty of the paraklasithyron. There was no certainty, no guarantee, only longing unfolding patiently beneath the night sky. Theron rested one hand lightly against the cool stone wall beside the doorway. The marble still held traces of warmth gathered from the day's sunlight. Inside the house, all was quiet. Perhaps the family slept already. Perhaps Lyra herself rested somewhere beyond those walls, wrapped in linen blankets, while moonlight drifted softly through her window. Or perhaps she too remained awake, listening. Ancient Greek poets often wrote of sleepless love, of lovers wandering beneath the moon, while the rest of the world dreamed peacefully. To them, desire was not loud or triumphant. It was gentle suffering, a sweet and sacred unrest. And so Theron remained there beneath the night. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. The city breathed softly around him. A breeze carried the faint fragrance of jasmine from a nearby courtyard. Somewhere beyond the rooftops came the distant sound of waves touching the shores of Piraeus Harbor. Then, finally, he spoke. Not loudly, barely more than a whisper. Lyra. The name dissolved into the warm night air almost immediately. He lowered his gaze afterward, suddenly uncertain, yet there was something strangely peaceful about speaking her name beneath the stars, as though the night itself listened kindly. Theron leaned lightly against the doorway beside the lantern. Above him, the moon illuminated the narrow street in silver light. Tiny insects circled the torch flame lazily. Shadows of olive branches danced softly against the walls, and slowly, words began to emerge. Not rehearsed declarations, not grand speeches, only quiet thoughts spoken honestly into the darkness. He spoke of the marketplace at sunset, of seeing her near the flower stalls, of the strange stillness he felt whenever she appeared nearby. He spoke of the orchard where he had chosen the apple, of the morning dew upon its skin, of how foolish and terrified he had felt placing it at her doorstep. And all the while, the city remained silent around him. This was not performance, not seduction. It was confession carried gently into the night. The Greeks understood something modern life often forgets. That longing itself can be beautiful, not merely fulfillment, not possession, but the ache of distance, the uncertainty, the waiting beneath moonlight while another soul remains just beyond reach. Theron closed his eyes briefly. The warm breeze touched his face. For a moment he imagined future years unfolding endlessly before him. Festivals, harvests, summers fading into autumns beside the sea, and somewhere within those imagined years, perhaps her. The thought felt impossibly fragile. Then, a sound, soft movement from within the house. Theron opened his eyes immediately. The lantern flame flickered, and above the doorway, hidden partly behind a linen curtain, a narrow upper window shifted open slightly. Only slightly. Moonlight touched pale fabric. Then a face appeared. Lyra, not fully visible, only fragments of her illuminated by silver light. Dark hair resting loosely over one shoulder, quiet eyes watching from above. Neither spoke. The distance between them remained filled with silence and moonlight. Yet something profound existed within that silence, something tender. The Greeks believed that love often revealed itself not through certainty, but through restraint. A glance withheld, a hand not quite touching another, a voice lowered almost to silence, and so Lyra remained there quietly at the window, while Theron stood beneath the lantern below. The breeze moved softly between them. At last, after what felt like a suspended dream, she spoke. "You should sleep." Her voice was calm, gentle, barely louder than the wind itself. Theron smiled faintly. "I tried." For the first time, warmth touched her expression. Not laughter exactly, something quieter. Then she lowered her gaze briefly before looking toward him once more. "The neighbors will wake. Then I will whisper more softly." Moonlight shimmered across the marble walls around them. Somewhere nearby, water dripped rhythmically from a fountain into stone basins. Lyra rested her hands lightly against the edge of the window. "You speak often beneath doorways?" she asked softly. "Only beneath one." Again silence. Yet this silence no longer felt uncertain. It felt shared, and beneath the endless stars of ancient Greece, beside a flickering lantern and a closed wooden door, two restless souls lingered together, while the ancient city dreamed peacefully around them. Far from the crowded streets of Athens, beyond the busy ports and marble temples of the mainland, there rested an island wrapped in sea mist and poetry. Lesbos, an island where the wind carried the scent of pine trees and salt water through the hills, where olive groves shimmered silver green beneath the Mediterranean sun, where waves folded gently against rocky shores, worn smooth by centuries of tides. And on this island long ago lived a woman whose words would drift through history like music heard faintly in a dream. Her name was Sappho. Even now, after thousands of years, her voice survives only in fragments, pieces, whispers, broken lines of poetry scattered across time like flower petals floating upon dark water. Yet perhaps that is fitting, because longing itself often arrives in fragments, a memory, a glance, the echo of a voice after someone has gone. The Greeks understood this kind of sadness intimately, not despair, not hopelessness, but melancholy softened by beauty. And no poet captured the feeling of love more delicately than Sappho of Lesbos. Tonight, let us drift slowly to her island. Imagine approaching Lesbos by sea. A wooden vessel moves gently across the dark blue waters of the Aegean. Oars dip rhythmically into the ocean. The surface of the water catches sunlight like shattered glass. The air smells of salt and cedarwood. White gulls circle overhead lazily, and ahead, rising from the sea like a vision, appear the green hills of the island. The shoreline curves inward toward quiet harbors where fishing boats rock softly against wooden docks. Cypress trees sway above pale stone homes. Vineyards stretch across warm hillsides beneath endless skies. Everything moves more slowly here, more softly, as though the island itself exists half within the waking world and half within memory. Sappho lived in this atmosphere of sea breeze and song, sometime around the late 7th century, before the Common Era. Much about her life remains uncertain now, blurred by time and myth, but her poetry survived, or enough of it survived, to reveal something eternal. She wrote not about war or conquest or heroic victories. She wrote about the trembling human heart, about desire, beauty, jealousy, the unbearable sweetness of seeing someone you love, and the quiet sorrow of knowing such moments cannot last forever. On warm evenings, as the sun descended toward the sea, gatherings were often held beneath shaded courtyards and open terraces overlooking the water. Young women dressed in flowing linen robes sat together weaving garlands of violets and myrtle. Lyres played softly nearby. Oil lamps flickered awake one by one as dusk deepened, and somewhere among them sat Sappho, listening, observing, transforming ordinary moments into poetry delicate enough to survive across millennia. Imagine her now, dark-haired, thoughtful, seated beside an open window while the sea breeze lifts the edge of parchment resting beneath her fingers. Outside, cicadas sing endlessly in olive trees glowing gold beneath the setting sun. Inside, the room smells faintly of beeswax candles and crushed flowers. She dips a reed pen carefully into ink, then pauses, because some emotions resist language, especially love. The Greeks possessed many words for love, not simply one. There was eros, passionate desire, philia, deep friendship, agape, devotional affection. Yet Sappho explored something even quieter, the fragile ache hidden inside beauty itself, the sadness that accompanies every fleeting moment, a hand touching another briefly before separating, a smile disappearing, summer fading slowly into autumn. She understood that love often hurts not because it fails, but because it cannot remain unchanged. And perhaps nowhere felt this truth more strongly than upon the islands of Greece. There, surrounded endlessly by the sea, everything seemed temporary. Ships arrived, ships departed, sailors vanished beyond horizons. Seasons passed across the water like drifting dreams. Even sunsets felt unbearably brief. Theron would one day hear Sappho's poetry recited in Athens, years after the golden apple, years after moonlit conversations beside Lyra's doorway. One evening, during a gathering in the home of a wealthy merchant near the Agora, musicians played quietly while wine mixed with honey was poured into shallow cups. The room glowed amber beneath oil lamps. Cedar smoke drifted lazily upward toward painted ceilings. Outside, rain fell softly against the stone streets of Athens, and there, beside the firelight, an elderly traveler from Lesbos began reciting fragments of Sappho's poetry. The room slowly quieted. Even the musicians lowered their instruments. The traveler's voice was soft and weathered by age and sea wind. Yet each word seemed to carry extraordinary tenderness. He spoke of longing that makes the body tremble, of beauty brighter than armies, of love arriving suddenly like fire moving beneath the skin. And as Theron listened, he felt something strange unfold within him. Recognition, because the poetry described emotions he himself had never fully understood until meeting Lyra. The stillness that overtook him whenever she appeared nearby. The sleeplessness, the painful sweetness of anticipation, the fear woven inseparably into desire. Sappho's words drifted through the warm room like incense. Outside, rain continued falling gently over Athens, and for a moment, Theron imagined the island of Lesbos, far away beneath moonlight. He imagined waves touching its shores endlessly. He imagined Sappho herself, seated beside an open window, listening to the sea, while composing verses destined to outlive empires. Perhaps this is why her poetry still feels alive today, because human longing changes very little across time. The ancient Greeks loved beneath torchlight. We love beneath electric skies. Yet the heart remains astonishingly similar, still fragile, still hopeful, still wounded by beauty. As the evening gathering continued, the traveler recited another fragment, a very old one, only partially remembered now, yet beautiful precisely because of its incompleteness. The Greeks accepted incompleteness differently than we do. Broken statues, weathered temples, half-lost poems, these things still possessed beauty, perhaps even greater beauty, because time had touched them. And so the fragments of Sappho survived like echoes from another world, not whole, not perfect, but haunting. Much later that night, after the gathering ended, Theron walked slowly home through rain-darkened streets. Water shimmered upon marble beneath torchlight. The air smelled of wet earth and olive wood smoke. Athens slept quietly around him, yet Sappho's words lingered within his thoughts, especially one feeling above all others, that love is both joy and sorrow at once, because every beautiful moment passes. The Greeks understood this deeply. Perhaps that is why they loved so intensely, why they filled ordinary gestures with meaning. An apple left upon a doorstep, a whispered conversation beneath moonlight, a garland hung quietly beside a door. They knew such moments could never last forever, and still they cherished them completely. Far away, beyond the sleeping mainland, waves continued breaking gently upon the shores of Lesbos beneath the stars, and somewhere within the endless silence of history, the voice of Sappho continued whispering softly through the ancient night. Morning arrived slowly over Athens. Before the first merchants unfolded their linen awnings, before philosophers gathered beneath shaded porticos, before bronze workshops rang with the sound of hammers striking metal, the city existed for a brief and fragile moment within silence. The sky above the Acropolis glowed pale lavender. Thin ribbons of mist drifted low through the distant hills beyond the city walls. Olive trees stirred softly beneath the cool breath of dawn, and in the narrow streets below, small signs of life began appearing one by one, like embers slowly awakening beneath ash. A baker opened the heavy wooden shutters of his shop. Warm air carrying the scent of barley bread spilled gently into the street. A servant girl crossed a courtyard, holding clay vessels filled with water gathered before sunrise. Far away, somewhere near the harbor at Piraeus, gulls cried out above fishing boats, rocking quietly against the docks. The world felt hushed, suspended, as though Athens itself had not yet fully awakened from dreams. Then slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, the city began to breathe. Doors opened, footsteps echoed against stone, voices emerged softly from shadowed alleyways, and as the golden Mediterranean sun climbed higher above the hills, its warm light poured into the heart of the city. The agora, the living center of Athens, the marketplace. But to call it merely a marketplace would fail entirely to capture what it truly was. The agora was a world unto itself, a breathing sea of voices, movement, fragrance, color, and human longing unfolding beneath the endless Greek sky. Everything passed through the agora eventually, philosophers debating the nature of existence, farmers arriving with woven baskets filled with figs and olives, travelers from distant islands speaking unfamiliar dialects, priests carrying incense toward nearby temples, children weaving carelessly between crowded stalls, poets searching for listeners, merchants searching for fortune, and lovers searching quietly for one another among the crowd. By midday, sunlight flooded the open square with radiant warmth. Long linen canopies stretched overhead between wooden poles, softening the brightness into shifting patterns of gold and shadow that moved gently across the stone pathways whenever the wind stirred. The air itself seemed alive, rich with countless scents blending together beneath the summer heat. Dried figs, crushed mint leaves, warm bread brushed with olive oil, goat cheese wrapped in cloth, rosemary, thyme, fresh-cut cedarwood, roasted chestnuts crackling softly over small bronze braziers. Nearby, a spice merchant from the eastern coast displayed tiny clay bowls filled with saffron, cinnamon, and crushed herbs, so fragrant that people slowed instinctively while passing his stall. The aromas drifted through the agora endlessly, folding together with the warmth of sunlit marble and the faint salt carried inland from the distant sea. Everywhere, movement unfolded slowly and continuously. Sandals brushed against pale marble dust, bronze coins clinked softly into weathered hands, linen robes whispered against stone columns. A flock of pigeons burst suddenly upward into the bright air before circling lazily above the square, and beneath it all existed a constant murmur, thousands of voices layered gently together, not loud enough to feel chaotic, instead soft and rhythmic, like waves touching a shoreline. Fragments of conversation drifted through the warm air, arguments about philosophy, debates over olive prices, poetry recited absent-mindedly beneath shaded arches, laughter from wine cellars, the deep voice of an old storyteller gathering listeners near a fountain. And through this endless human tide walked Theron, slowly, aimlessly, at least in appearance, yet inwardly, every step carried quiet intention. The sun warmed the back of his shoulders as he moved between crowded stalls. Light filtered through hanging cloth above him, painting shifting patterns across the stone beneath his feet. He passed a merchant arranging polished bronze mirrors upon a table draped in dark blue linen. Further ahead, women examined necklaces of carved amber and sea-green glass imported from distant shores. Nearby, an elderly man carefully sliced ripe figs open with a small curved knife, revealing deep crimson interiors glistening in the sunlight like jewels. The scent was intoxicating. Sweet fruit, warm dust, olive oil, burning cedarwood, honey cakes cooling beside woven baskets. Athens felt impossibly alive, yet Theron noticed very little of it fully, because somewhere within the crowded agora, Lyra was there, or at least he hoped she was. And hope, even quiet hope, possesses a strange power over the human heart. It sharpens every glance, every sound, every movement within a crowd. He told himself there was no certainty he would see her today. The agora was vast, hundreds passed through it every hour. Still, his feet continued carrying him there day after day, with a patience he barely understood himself. Love in ancient Greece often unfolded this way, not dramatically, not suddenly, but through repeated crossings of paths, shared spaces, lingering glances stretched across ordinary moments, and perhaps that made it feel even more profound, because affection grew slowly inside familiarity, like ivy climbing stone walls, one patient inch at a time. Theron paused near a shaded fountain, where water spilled continuously from carved lion heads into wide marble basins worn smooth by generations of hands. People gathered there to cool themselves from the heat. A child laughed while splashing water against his wrists. An old woman adjusted jars balanced carefully upon her shoulder. Nearby, two philosophers debated quietly beneath a colonnade, their voices blending with the distant hum of the market. Theron lowered his hands briefly into the cool water. The sensation sent relief gently through his skin. He closed his eyes for only a moment. The fountain water smelled faintly of wet stone and minerals carried down from the hills. The breeze shifted, and suddenly a familiar fragrance drifted softly through the air. Myrtle, fresh myrtle leaves, subtle, green, delicate. His eyes opened immediately, not from certainty, from instinct. Slowly, almost afraid to move too quickly and break the fragile moment, he turned. At first he saw only the crowd, merchants, travelers, sunlight moving across linen canopies. Then, her. Lyra stood several stalls away, beside a flower cellar sheltered beneath hanging strips of pale fabric that fluttered gently in the breeze. For one suspended heartbeat, the world seemed to narrow around her. The crowd blurred into soft movement and distant sound. Everything slowed. She wore a simple robe of light cream linen, gathered loosely at the waist with a woven blue cord. The sunlight filtering through the canopy above touched her hair with warm bronze tones. In one hand she held a small bundle of herbs tied carefully with twine, myrtle. That was the scent. The flower merchant beside her arranged violets and white narcissus blossoms into circular garlands while speaking softly. Though Theron could no longer hear the words, because something ancient and quiet had settled over him. The Greeks often described love not as an explosion, but as a sudden stillness, as though time itself hesitated. And now, standing within the crowded agora surrounded by endless motion, Theron felt utterly motionless inside. He watched the slow movements of her hands as she examined the flowers, the way her fingers brushed lightly across the petals, the calm rhythm of her breathing, the tiny strand of dark hair moving softly beside her cheek whenever the breeze passed through the market. Everything about the moment felt impossibly delicate, fragile enough to vanish if approached too suddenly. Theron remained where he was beside the fountain. He did not call out, did not move toward her. Instead, he simply watched, not greedily, not possessively, only with the quiet astonishment of someone encountering beauty unexpectedly in the middle of ordinary life. Nearby, the agora continued breathing around them. A fish seller shouted prices toward passing customers. Bronze wind chimes hanging from a nearby stall clinked softly together. The scent of roasted almonds drifted through warm sunlight. Far above, white birds circled slowly against the deep blue sky. And then, as though sensing his gaze through the movement of the crowd itself, Lyra looked up. Their eyes met across the agora. The moment arrived so quietly that no one else would have noticed it. No dramatic music, no interruption of the marketplace, only two pairs of eyes finding one another through shifting sunlight and drifting dust. Yet for Theron, the sensation felt enormous. Her expression changed subtly, not surprise exactly, recognition, gentle recognition, as though she too had been carrying some invisible awareness of him through recent days. Neither smiled immediately. Instead, there existed a brief stillness between them, a silence hidden inside the noise of the marketplace. The Greeks believed that the eyes revealed truths words often concealed, and now, across the crowded agora, something passed silently between them. Curiosity, tenderness, longing still too uncertain to name aloud. The breeze moved softly through the hanging linen above. Sunlight shifted again across the stone. Lyra lowered her gaze briefly toward the flowers in her hands. Then slowly, almost shyly, she smiled, small, quiet, yet enough to alter the entire atmosphere of the morning. Theron felt warmth rise suddenly within his chest. Not excitement exactly, something softer, a kind of peaceful disbelief, because until now, so much of their connection had existed within uncertainty. An apple placed silently upon a doorstep, whispers beneath moonlight, passing glances. But this moment felt different, mutual, acknowledged. The flower seller handed Lyra a small woven garland of white blossoms. She thanked the woman softly before turning once more toward the crowd, toward him. For an instant, Theron wondered whether he should walk to her, say something, anything. Yet strangely, the moment already felt complete. The Greeks understood the beauty of restraint. Not every feeling required immediate action. Some emotions deepened precisely because they unfolded slowly, like wine aging patiently within cool clay jars, or sunlight moving gradually across temple walls through the course of a long afternoon. Lyra adjusted the herbs carefully within her hands. Then, after one final glance toward him, she disappeared gently back into the flowing crowd of the agora, gone not abruptly, but gradually, her figure dissolving into layers of sunlight, linen, voices, and movement until she became only another fragment within the living marketplace. Yet the feeling she left behind remained. Theron stood motionless beside the fountain for a long while afterward. The cool water continued pouring endlessly into the marble basin beside him. The agora moved around him in waves of color and sound. Children laughed somewhere nearby. A philosopher raised his voice passionately beneath the colonnade. The scent of figs and mint drifted once more through the warm air. But within Theron, something had changed quietly, because sometimes love begins not with words, not with touch, not even with certainty. Sometimes it begins with a hidden glance across a crowded marketplace beneath the golden light of ancient Greece, where for one impossible moment, the entire world seems to pause between one heartbeat and the next. Night had fully descended over Athens. The city, which only hours earlier shimmered beneath the brilliance of the Mediterranean sun, now rested beneath a canopy of deep indigo scattered with stars. Warm darkness gathered gently between marble columns and narrow alleyways. Oil lamps flickered behind shuttered windows. The distant sounds of the agora had faded into little more than soft echoes drifting through the sleeping streets. Far above the city, the Acropolis glowed faintly beneath moonlight. Its temples stood motionless against the night sky, pale as ancient bones, watching silently over generations of longing, laughter, philosophy, and love. And somewhere below those sacred heights, behind the carved cedar doors of an Athenian home, perfumed with wine and incense, a symposium had begun. The Greeks loved conversation almost as deeply as they loved beauty itself. Not hurried conversation, not loud argument, but slow, wandering thought, unfolding through the course of an evening, while lamps burned low and cups of diluted wine passed gently from hand to hand. A symposium was more than a gathering. It was a ritual of reflection, a place where poets, philosophers, musicians, and dreamers lingered together deep into the night, speaking about the mysteries of existence beneath drifting clouds of cedar smoke. And among all subjects discussed beneath those flickering lamps, none fascinated the Greeks more endlessly than love. Tonight, The symposium unfolded within the home of a wealthy patron near the quieter northern streets of Athens. The courtyard entrance stood open to the warm evening air. Ivy climbed the pale stone walls in twisting patterns. Bronze lanterns hung from wooden beams overhead, their flames trembling softly whenever the night breeze wandered through. Inside, the atmosphere glowed with amber warmth. Oil lamps rested upon low cedar tables, carved with delicate patterns of olive leaves and waves. Their golden light painted long shadows across frescoed walls, depicting distant islands, sea creatures, and the gods themselves moving through clouds of pale blue and gold. The room smelled richly of many things: poured wine sweetened with honey, burning myrrh incense, fresh figs split open upon bronze plates, warm bread brushed lightly with olive oil and herbs, and beneath it all lingered the faint mineral scent of cooling marble touched by the evening air. Guests reclined upon cushioned couches, arranged carefully around the room, linen robes draped softly across their shoulders. Some held shallow wine cups loosely within thoughtful hands. Others listened with half-closed eyes, while musicians nearby played quiet melodies upon the lyre. Nothing moved quickly here. Even conversation unfolded slowly, patiently, like waves arriving one after another upon a moonlit shore. Theron sat among them tonight. The symposium had already stretched deep into the evening. Earlier, philosophers debated the nature of beauty, while an elderly poet recited verses about sailors lost beneath winter storms. Laughter occasionally rose gently through the room, before dissolving once more into thoughtful silence. Now the hour had grown later, the lamps burned lower, the musicians played more softly. Outside, Athens rested peacefully beneath the stars, and at the center of the gathering sat a storyteller preparing to speak of love. Not ordinary love, not fleeting attraction, but the ancient and mysterious longing that seemed to follow human beings everywhere, across cities, across years, across entire lifetimes. The storyteller was old now. His silver hair caught the warm glow of the oil lamps as he leaned slightly forward upon his couch. Fine lines rested around his eyes, like delicate cracks in ancient marble. When he finally began speaking, his voice emerged calm and low, carrying easily through the quiet room. He spoke of Aristophanes, the great playwright, and of a speech once given long ago during another symposium remembered forever within the writings of Plato. As the old man spoke, the listeners grew still. Even the musicians allowed their melodies to fade completely into silence. Only the soft crackling of lamp flames remained. The storyteller lifted his wine cup slowly. Then he said, "There was once a time, before sorrow entered the human heart, when we were not as we are now." The room seemed to settle deeper into stillness. Outside, somewhere far beyond the walls of the house, wind moved softly through olive trees beneath the moon. And there, within the warm amber glow of the symposium, the ancient myth began unfolding. Long ago, Aristophanes said, humanity existed in another form entirely, not divided, not lonely, not incomplete, but whole. The first humans were unlike anything living upon the earth today. They possessed 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 faces resting upon a single circular head, 2 hearts beating together within one body. They moved with extraordinary grace and strength, rolling swiftly across the earth beneath the heavens like celestial beings wandering through dreams. Some were born from the sun, some from the earth, some from the moon, and because they were whole, they knew nothing of longing. Imagine such completeness for a moment, to move through the world never searching, never aching for connection, never wondering whether another soul might finally understand the hidden chambers of your heart. These ancient beings existed in perfect union within themselves. They slept peacefully curled together as one creature beneath the stars. They laughed with 2 mouths, saw the world through 4 watchful eyes, held themselves during moments of sorrow, and because they were complete, They possessed immense power, too much power. The storyteller paused then, allowing silence to gather once more around the room. Theron listened intently. The oil lamps flickered softly against the painted walls. Wine shimmered dark red within bronze cups. And somewhere deep inside himself, he already sensed the sadness approaching within the myth. Because all beautiful things in Greek stories eventually encounter loss, the old man continued. The gods upon Olympus began to fear these complete beings, especially Zeus, for completeness creates confidence, and confidence, among mortals, often drifts dangerously close to defiance. The ancient humans grew bold, restless, proud of their strength. They climbed mountains, challenged the heavens, spoke too freely of their own greatness beneath the stars, and Zeus, ruler of thunder and lightning, watched them carefully from his golden throne above the clouds. At first he considered destroying them entirely, but the gods depended upon humanity for worship, offerings, songs, and prayers. So instead, Zeus chose another punishment, not death, something far more sorrowful: division. The storyteller lowered his gaze toward the flickering lamp beside him. When he spoke again, his voice softened almost into a whisper. One by one, he said, Zeus split them apart. The room remained utterly silent. Outside, rain had begun falling lightly against the distant streets of Athens, soft, rhythmic, like fingertips brushing marble. In the imagination of every listener, the ancient world unfolded, dark storm clouds gathering above the earth, lightning moving across the heavens in blinding rivers of gold-white fire, and below, the first humans standing together in confusion as thunder rolled across mountains and sea. Then, the terrible brilliance of Zeus descending, a flash of divine light, a sound like the sky itself breaking open, and suddenly, separation. Bodies once joined torn painfully into halves, arms reaching desperately toward missing arms, faces crying out for vanished faces, hearts divided, souls severed. The storyteller spoke slowly now, allowing every image to linger. He described the silence afterward, the unbearable silence. For the first time, the divided humans stood alone, only 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 face, 1 half of a soul. They wandered the earth in confusion and grief, searching endlessly for what had been lost. Some crossed mountains, some drifted across islands and oceans, some stood in crowded marketplaces, surrounded by thousands of people, and still felt profoundly incomplete. And whenever one half glimpsed the other, everything changed. The Greeks believed love was born in that moment, not merely attraction, recognition, the sudden overwhelming feeling that another soul carries something ancient and familiar, a missing piece, a forgotten wholeness. The storyteller described how these separated beings would embrace one another desperately, once reunited, not wishing to part, not even briefly. They would sleep wrapped together beneath trees and stars, trying silently to remember the completeness they once possessed before Zeus divided them. Some forgot to eat, some forgot to move entirely. So deep was their longing to remain joined once more. The room glowed softly around Theron as the myth unfolded. Shadows shifted gently across frescoed walls. The scent of myrrh and wine drifted through warm air, and slowly, quietly, the story settled deep within him. Because now he understood something. Why seeing Lyra across the agora felt strangely familiar. Why her voice beside the moonlit window soothed some hidden ache within him he had never known how to name. Why longing itself carried both sweetness and sorrow intertwined together. Perhaps, the Greeks suggested, love feels so powerful because it awakens the memory of something ancient, something lost long before memory began. The desire to become whole again. The storyteller leaned back slightly as silence filled the symposium once more. No one rushed to speak. No one wished to disturb the fragile atmosphere woven by the myth. Outside, rain continued falling softly over Athens. The lamps burned lower. Somewhere nearby, a servant quietly refilled wine cups before retreating once more into shadow, and for a long while, the listeners simply breathed together beneath the warm glow of oil light, each carrying private thoughts into the deepening night. Theron lowered his gaze toward the dark wine resting untouched within his cup. Its surface reflected trembling gold from the lamps above, and within that reflection, he imagined countless wandering souls moving endlessly through the ancient world, across crowded agoras, across storm-dark seas, through temples scented with incense and olive smoke, searching, always searching, for the one presence capable of quieting the loneliness placed within humanity by the gods themselves. Outside, beyond the sleeping city, waves rolled gently against the shores of Greece beneath the endless stars, and somewhere within the vast silence of the universe, separated souls continued reaching patiently toward one another through the dark. Far to the south of Athens, beyond the olive-covered hills of Attica, beyond the crowded ports and marble marketplaces, where philosophers wandered beneath painted colonnades, another world existed, a sterner world, a quieter world, a land shaped not by soft conversation or flowing poetry, but by discipline, endurance, silence, and stone. Sparta. Even the air felt different there. The mountains rose harsher against the sky. Their slopes, rugged and sun-bleached, stood watch over the valleys of Laconia, like ancient guardians carved by the hands of forgotten gods. Pine forests covered the distant ridges in deep green shadows, while below them stretched open plains glowing gold beneath the relentless Mediterranean sun. The river Eurotas moved calmly through the valley like a silver ribbon, reflecting light so brightly at midday that travelers often narrowed their eyes while crossing its banks. The land itself seemed to teach resilience. Summer heat settled heavily upon the earth. Dust rose slowly beneath marching feet, and the wind descending from Mount Taygetus carried a cool sharpness even during the warmest afternoons. Unlike Athens, Sparta did not overflow with grand temples, bustling marketplaces, or endless philosophical debates drifting through shaded streets. Sparta was quieter, simpler, more restrained. Its beauty revealed itself slowly, not in ornament, but in endurance. The sounds of Sparta were different too. At dawn, the city awakened not to merchants calling across crowded agoras, but to the distant echoes of training grounds. Wooden spears striking shields, sandals brushing dry earth, measured breathing beneath the pale morning light. Young Spartan warriors trained beneath the open sky from childhood onward. Discipline shaped every hour of their lives. Strength, loyalty, restraint, and honor were woven deeply into the soul of the city itself. Yet despite Sparta's harsh reputation, love still existed there. Only, it took another form. Not delicate poetry whispered beside moonlit windows, not garlands left upon doorsteps scented with myrtle and rose petals. In Sparta, love was quieter, harder to see, but perhaps even deeper because of it. It lived inside acts of trust, inside loyalty that endured without constant reassurance, inside the calm meeting of two pairs of eyes already prepared to lose everything except honor itself. The Spartans believed affection should strengthen the spirit rather than weaken it, and so love in Sparta became something grounded, steady, like mountain stone warmed by the afternoon sun. Imagine now a late evening in Sparta. The day's heat still lingers faintly upon the earth. Dust glows amber beneath the descending sun. Long shadows stretch across the training fields where young warriors had spent the afternoon moving in disciplined formation beneath the stern gaze of instructors. The sounds of practice have mostly faded now. Only occasional echoes remain. The distant strike of wood against wood, the low murmur of voices drifting across the valley. Far above, swallows circle lazily against a sky, slowly deepening from gold into soft violet. And through this quiet evening walks a Spartan warrior named Dorian. His movements are calm, measured, not hurried. Years of discipline shaped the rhythm of his body long ago. Even his silence seems deliberate. Dust clings lightly to his sandals from the training grounds. The fading sunlight catches faint bronze tones within his dark hair. Across one shoulder rests a crimson cloak, stirred gently by the mountain breeze descending from Taygetus. Sparta admired restraint. Emotion was rarely displayed openly there, yet inside Dorian's thoughts lived a devotion deeper than words could comfortably hold. Her name was Helena, not the legendary Helen whose beauty launched 1,000 ships into war. Another Helena entirely, a Spartan woman born among the same valleys, rivers and mountain winds that shaped him. He first saw her years earlier during a religious festival honoring Artemis Orthia near the banks of the Euphrates River. The memory remained vivid still, torchlight flickering against dusk, pine smoke drifting into the evening air, young women carrying woven baskets filled with barley and olive branches toward the temple steps. And among them, Helena, not fragile, not timid. Spartan women were raised differently from women in many other Greek cities. They trained physically. They spoke with confidence. Strength was admired in them, not hidden away. And when Dorian first looked into Helena's eyes beside the riverbank years ago, he saw not softness alone, he saw steadiness, a quiet kind of courage, the kind born from growing beneath the shadow of Spartan mountains. Now, as evening deepened over the valley once more, Dorian walked toward the outskirts of the city where the training grounds faded gradually into open countryside. The air smelled of dry grass, pine resin, and warm earth cooling beneath the setting sun. Somewhere nearby, cicadas sang endlessly among olive trees silvered by twilight. Ahead, Helena waited beside the river, not dramatically, not like figures from Athenian poetry. She simply stood there quietly beneath a grove of cypress trees, while the fading light moved softly across the water beside her. A linen cloak rested loosely around her shoulders against the cool mountain breeze. Her dark hair, braided simply, shifted gently whenever the wind passed through the trees. For a long moment neither spoke, and perhaps nowhere in Greece did silence carry more meaning than in Sparta, because Spartans did not waste words. Everything unnecessary was stripped away. What remained mattered deeply. Dorian approached slowly until he stood beside her, overlooking the river. The Euphrates flowed calmly through the valley, reflecting the colors of the evening sky in trembling shades of gold and blue. Above the distant mountains, the first stars had begun appearing. Helena glanced toward him briefly. "You trained late today." Her voice was calm, low, steady as the river itself. Dorian nodded once. The younger boys struggle with formation. A faint smile touched her expression. "They fear disappointing you. They fear disappointing Sparta." The breeze moved through the cypress branches overhead, releasing the clean, sharp scent of pine into the cooling air. Again, silence settled between them, yet unlike awkward silence, this felt restful, shared, like two people who no longer needed constant words to understand one another. In many Greek cities, romance often unfolded through poetry and elaborate gestures, but Spartan affection revealed itself differently. A hand resting briefly against another during farewell, a glance held one heartbeat longer than necessary, the quiet certainty that both would remain loyal even through absence, hardship, or death itself. Helena lowered herself carefully onto a smooth stone near the riverbank. Dorian remained standing for a moment before sitting beside her, close, but not touching. The Spartans respected restraint even in tenderness, especially in tenderness. The last sunlight drifted slowly across the valley. Warm gold faded gradually from the hillsides, while cool blue shadows gathered beneath trees and stone. Far away, faint echoes still carried from the training grounds. The rhythm of Spartan life never fully disappeared, even at dusk, especially not at dusk. Helena watched the river quietly. Then she asked, "Will they send your unit north?" Dorian did not answer immediately. The question lingered between them, beside the flowing water. At last, he nodded once. Before autumn. The breeze grew slightly colder now, as darkness descended further over the valley. Helena lowered her gaze briefly toward her hands, folded calmly in her lap. No tears appeared, no dramatic reaction. Spartan women were raised understanding the uncertainty of life beside warriors. Yet beneath her composure lived something deeper. Not fear exactly, something quieter. The heavy awareness that love and loss often walked beside one another through human life. Dorian looked toward her then, really looked. The fading light touched the outline of her face softly. Her expression remained calm, yet within her eyes existed an entire world of unspoken feeling, pride, loyalty, sadness carefully restrained, and something else, trust. The profound trust of someone who understands exactly who stands beside them. The Greeks often described love as madness, as longing, as divine chaos. But Sparta understood another version entirely. Love as endurance, as unwavering devotion, as standing beside another soul, with complete awareness of mortality and choosing loyalty anyway. The stars multiplied slowly above them. The valley darkened. A shepherd's distant fire flickered faintly upon a hillside far away. And still they remained there beside the river, listening to the sound of water moving endlessly through stone and earth. Eventually Helena spoke again. "When you return." Dorian turned slightly toward her, but she did not finish the sentence. Because Spartans rarely spoke confidently about the future. Too much depended upon fate, upon war, upon the unpredictable will of the gods. Instead, Dorian reached slowly toward the ground beside him and lifted a small, smooth stone from the riverbank. Wordlessly, he placed it into Helena's hand. A simple thing, cool from the flowing water, unremarkable to anyone else, yet meaningful precisely because no elaborate explanation accompanied it. A promise without spoken promise. "I will remember you." Helena closed her fingers gently around the stone. Then, after a long silence filled only by wind and river water, she finally looked toward him fully. Their eyes met, and within that gaze lived an emotion deeper than fragile romance, not infatuation, not temporary desire, but recognition forged slowly through respect, endurance, and shared understanding. The kind of love capable of surviving absence, the kind born beneath Spartan skies. The mountain breeze moved softly around them. Above, the stars of ancient Greece shimmered endlessly over valleys, rivers, olive groves, and distant temples. And there beside the quiet waters of the Eurotas, two souls sat together in silence, fully aware that tomorrow, or next season, or some distant dawn, fate might separate them. Yet even so, neither turned away. Because in Sparta, love was not proven through beautiful speeches. It was proven through steadfastness, through loyalty carried silently within the heart, through remaining emotionally present beside another person, even while standing beneath the shadow of uncertainty itself. The night deepened slowly around them. Cicadas sang softly among the grasses. The river continued its endless journey through the darkened valley, and beneath the eternal stars above Sparta, devotion rested quietly between two people who understood that true love was not fragile at all. It was enduring, like stone, like mountains, like the ancient earth beneath their feet. Never emptiness, The ancient world was always quietly alive after dark. Waves whispered endlessly against the rocks below sea cliffs. Olive trees shifted beneath the cool breath of midnight winds. Far across distant hillsides, isolated lanterns glowed softly beside shepherd camps and sleeping villages like tiny earthbound stars scattered beneath the heavens. And above it all stretched the sky, vast, dark, filled with endless constellations the Greeks knew intimately. Orion lifting his celestial spear, Cassiopeia reclining among silver stars, the faint river of the Milky Way flowing silently across the night like spilled dust from the realm of the gods. On such nights, when the world grew quiet enough for the human heart to hear itself clearly, many wandered toward the temples, especially the temples of Aphrodite, for love, to the Greeks, was never merely personal. It was divine, mysterious, a force capable of softening the strongest soul or unsettling the calmest mind. And so, throughout Greece, beneath moonlit skies and drifting incense smoke, people carried their longing toward the goddess who ruled over beauty, desire, tenderness, and yearning. Tonight, we travel to one such temple, far from crowded cities, far from marketplaces and symposiums and the dusty roads of Sparta. This temple stood upon a coastal cliff overlooking the dark waters of the Aegean Sea. The journey there wound slowly upward along narrow stone paths bordered by wild thyme, pale grasses, and twisted olive trees silvered softly beneath the moonlight. During the day, sunlight flooded the cliffs with radiant brilliance, but at night, the temple became something else entirely, dreamlike, almost unreal. Imagine approaching it now. The sea stretches endlessly below, black-blue beneath the stars. Moonlight trembles across the water in shifting silver pathways that seem to lead toward distant islands sleeping upon the horizon. The wind carries the scent of salt and cool stone. Far beneath the cliffs, waves rise and fall rhythmically against the rocks in slow breathing patterns older than memory itself. And ahead, emerging gradually from shadow and moonlight, stand the marble columns of Aphrodite's sanctuary, tall, silent, luminous beneath the night sky. The temple seems less constructed than summoned from the earth itself. Its pale pillars rise toward the heavens like frozen beams of moonlight. Ivy curls gently around the lower stones. Time and sea wind have softened certain edges of the marble, giving the sanctuary a weathered beauty touched by centuries of whispered prayers. Oil lamps burn along the outer steps, small flames flickering carefully inside bronze bowls. Their golden light trembles against the white stone, casting long shifting shadows across the columns and temple floor. The air here smells richly of incense, myrrh, frankincense, burning cedar resin. The fragrances drift slowly through the night wind, mingling with the scent of salt water rising from the sea below. Everything feels softened by darkness, the sounds, the light, even time itself, and through this sacred stillness walks a solitary figure, a woman named Kalyanera. Her name means beautiful grace. Yet tonight, she moves not with confidence, but with quiet hesitation. Her linen robes rustle softly against the marble steps as she ascends toward the temple entrance. The fabric, pale cream beneath moonlight, shifts gently around her ankles whenever the wind moves across the cliffs. One small oil lamp rests within her hands. Its flame glows warm gold against the darkness, illuminating her fingers curled carefully around the bronze handle. She has come alone. Most visitors to Aphrodite's sanctuary arrive during daylight festivals carrying flowers, perfumes, garlands, and offerings while priests moved through the temple, chanting prayers beneath the sun. But nighttime belonged to quieter visitors, those who carried private sorrows, private hopes, the lonely, the uncertain, the hearts still waiting for something unnamed. Kalyanira crosses the threshold slowly. The instant she enters, the air changes. Cooler, still, the temple interior opens around her in vast silence. Towering marble pillars disappear upward into darkness beyond the reach of the lamps. Frescoes painted long ago shimmer faintly along the walls. Scenes of Aphrodite rising from sea foam, attended by doves and drifting rose petals. The floor beneath her bare feet feels cold and perfectly smooth. Centuries of footsteps have polished the marble until it reflects the trembling lamplight like calm water. She walks carefully through the sanctuary. Every movement feels softened. Her breathing, the quiet whisper of fabric, the tiny crackling sound made by the oil flame whenever wind slips faintly through the columns. Ahead rests the altar, simple, ancient, a broad stone table darkened slightly by generations of wine offerings, incense ash, olive oil, and prayers spoken into the silence of countless nights before this one. Several lamps already burn nearby. Their light dances gently across the polished marble, creating shifting shadows that move like water across the walls. And behind the altar stands the statue of Aphrodite herself, tall, serene, her face carved with extraordinary calm. Moonlight entering through the open colonnade touches the white marble of her shoulders and cheeks so delicately that she appears almost alive within the darkness. Fresh flowers rest at the statue's feet, white roses, myrtle branches, tiny bowls filled with honey and figs, offerings left by other hopeful souls seeking comfort from the goddess of love. Kalyanira stops several steps before the altar. For a long moment, she simply stands there listening, to the sea below, to the flickering lamps, to her own heart moving quietly within her chest. The Greeks believed temples existed not merely as buildings, but as places where the boundary between mortal life and divine presence became thin, especially at night, especially in silence. Kalyanira lowers herself slowly onto her knees before the altar. The marble floor is cool beneath her skin. She places the oil lamp carefully beside her. Then, from within the folds of her robe, she removes a small piece of honeycomb, wrapped delicately in linen cloth. Simple, golden, its surface glistens softly in the lamplight. Honey was sacred in many Greek rituals, sweetness offered to sweetness, a gesture of tenderness. She places the honeycomb gently upon the altar stone. The movement is unhurried, almost reverent, as though even the smallest sound might disturb the sacred stillness gathered inside the temple. Then she reaches for a small clay vessel resting beside her. Wine, dark red, rich with the scent of grapes warmed beneath Mediterranean sunlight months earlier. Carefully, she tilts the vessel. A thin stream pours slowly across the altar. The wine catches the golden lamplight before disappearing into the ancient stone. The scent rises immediately into the cool air, earthy, sweet, faintly bitter. Kalyanira closes her eyes, and finally, after long silence, she begins to speak, not loudly, barely above a whisper. The words drift softly through the sanctuary, like breath itself. The Greeks often prayed intimately to their gods, not always with grand formal speeches, sometimes with honesty, sometimes with sorrow, sometimes simply with longing too heavy to carry alone. Kalyanira speaks of loneliness, of waiting, of watching other lives unfold while her own heart remains suspended between hope and uncertainty. She speaks of a man she once loved, not dramatically, not with bitterness, only with melancholy acceptance. He sailed eastward years ago aboard a merchant vessel and never returned. Perhaps storms claimed him. Perhaps another city welcomed him elsewhere beneath foreign stars. No certainty ever arrived, only absence. And absence, the Greeks understood deeply, can linger within a life like an unfinished song. The wind shifts gently through the open columns. Incense smoke curls upward in pale silver ribbons. The distant sea continues its endless breathing against the cliffs below. Kalyanira lowers her gaze toward the altar. "I no longer ask for his return," she whispers softly. The words almost disappear into the darkness. Instead, she prays for peace, for release from endless waiting, for the ability to remember love without being consumed by grief. The temple remains silent around her. Yet the silence feels comforting, protective, as though the goddess listens not through spoken reply, but through presence itself. Time moves strangely inside sacred places at night. Minutes dissolve, thoughts soften, the outside world grows distant. Kalyanira remains kneeling before the altar, while the lamps burn steadily around her. She notices small details gradually: the texture of the marble beneath her fingertips, the faint traces of incense ash gathered along the altar edges, the way moonlight entering through the columns creates silver pathways across the floor, the distant sound of waves below the cliffs, rising and falling with almost hypnotic rhythm, and slowly, quietly, something inside her begins to loosen, not disappear. Grief rarely disappears entirely, but soften, like knots untangling slowly beneath warm water. The Greeks believed Aphrodite governed not only desire, but healing through beauty, the comfort of music, the gentleness of touch, the quiet peace found in moonlight upon the sea. And here within the sanctuary, surrounded by incense smoke, flickering lamps, and endless night, Kalyanira feels herself becoming lighter somehow, not healed completely, simply less alone. Eventually she rises slowly from the marble floor. Her knees ache faintly from the cold stone. The lamp flames continue trembling softly beside the altar. For one final moment, she looks toward the statue of the goddess, toward the serene marble face, watching silently over the temple. Then she bows her head gently, not in fear, but gratitude. Outside, the night air greets her once more, as she steps beyond the sanctuary columns. The sea stretches endlessly beneath the cliffs, glowing silver blue beneath the moon. The wind carries the scent of thyme and salt water through the darkness, and far above, the stars of ancient Greece shimmer quietly over a world filled with longing souls, carrying secret prayers through the night. Kalyanira descends the temple steps slowly, her robes whispering softly against the stone. Behind her, the lamps of Aphrodite's sanctuary continue burning in the darkness like small golden hearts, refusing to surrender to the night. There were nights in ancient Greece when the world felt suspended between dream and waking. The sea grew quiet, the wind softened, even the olive trees, which whispered endlessly through the warm Mediterranean darkness, seemed to fall still beneath the gaze of the stars. On such nights, sleepless souls wandered alone through marble courtyards and narrow stone streets, carrying within themselves a feeling they could neither fully explain nor escape. The Greeks had a word for this feeling: mania, not madness in the way modern minds often imagine it, not chaos alone, not destruction, but divine madness, a sacred unraveling sent by the gods themselves. To the ancient Greeks, there were moments when human reason simply ceased to rule the heart, moments when desire arrived not gradually through logic or careful choice, but suddenly, mysteriously, like moonlight spilling across dark water. One instant, life moved calmly along familiar paths, and then something shifted. A glance, a voice, the movement of sunlight across another person's face, and afterward, nothing inside the soul remained entirely unchanged. The Greeks believed this transformation came from Eros, not merely love itself, but Eros, the ancient force of longing personified, the beautiful and terrible god who moved invisibly through mortal lives, loosening certainty from the human heart, like wind loosening petals from flowers. Tonight, let us wander slowly into that ancient understanding of love. Imagine Athens again beneath the deep hours of night. The agora sleeps now. The merchants are gone, the linen canopies folded away, the fountains silent except for the gentle dripping of water into moonlit basins. The city breathes softly beneath the stars. Oil lamps flicker behind closed shutters. Temple fires burn low upon distant hillsides. Somewhere far beyond the sleeping streets, waves move endlessly against the dark shores of the Aegean Sea. And awake within this quiet world lies a young man named Alexion. Sleep refuses him tonight, not because of fear, not because of illness, but because several days earlier, while crossing the crowded agora beneath the noon sunlight, he looked into someone's eyes, and since then, the entire rhythm of existence has altered. He lies upon a simple couch near the open courtyard of his family's home. Above him, the night sky stretches vast and endless between pale marble columns wrapped in climbing ivy. The stars move slowly overhead. A cool breeze carries the scent of fig trees and distant seawater into the courtyard. Yet rest remains impossibly far away. Alexion closes his eyes. Still, he sees her, not perfectly, only fragments. The loose movement of dark hair, stirred by market wind, the soft curve of her wrist while reaching toward a basket of oranges, the expression in her eyes when they met his briefly through the crowd. The memory returns endlessly, again, again, again. The Greeks understood this feeling deeply, the unsettling realization that the mind no longer belongs entirely to itself. Because true love, they believed, did not behave rationally. Reason speaks calmly. Love rarely does. Reason measures consequences. Love leaps toward mystery. Reason belongs to mortals. But mania, divine madness, belong to the gods. Some philosophers feared it. Others revered it. Plato himself once wrote that certain forms of madness were sacred gifts capable of leading the soul toward truth more profound than ordinary logic could ever discover. And among these divine madnesses, love stood supreme, because love dissolved illusion. It revealed hidden longing. It forced human beings to confront the terrifying vulnerability of needing another person. Alexion turns slowly onto his side beneath the moonlight. The linen blanket shifts softly against his skin. From the courtyard garden comes the faint fragrance of jasmine blooming beneath the night air. Still he cannot sleep. He rises quietly. Their feet touch cool marble polished smooth by generations of footsteps. The house remains silent around him. His family sleeps peacefully behind closed wooden doors, while he drifts alone into the courtyard beneath the stars. The Greeks often imagined Eros carrying a bow, but unlike later depictions, the oldest visions of Eros were not merely playful or innocent. Eros was ancient, powerful, unpredictable, a force capable of unsettling even gods themselves. His arrows did not wound the body, they awakened the soul. And perhaps that is why love feels so disorienting when it first arrives, because suddenly the familiar world becomes strange again. Ordinary sunlight appears softer, voices linger longer in memory. A single encounter begins echoing endlessly through the mind, like music heard faintly from a distant room. Alexion rests his hands lightly upon the edge of the courtyard fountain. Water reflects the stars in trembling fragments. He stares into it quietly. The city around him remains suspended in deep midnight stillness. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he admits something to himself. He is no longer master of his own thoughts, and this realization frightens him slightly. Not because the feeling itself is unpleasant, but because it possesses such immense quiet power. The Greeks believed fate often moved invisibly through human life. Threads woven by the Moirai, the ancient fates, long before mortals understood where they were being led. Perhaps love itself was part of this weaving, an unseen current guiding souls toward one another across years, cities, and seas. Alexian remembers the exact instant it began. The agora had been crowded that afternoon. Warm sunlight filtered through hanging linen canopies. Merchants shouted prices over baskets of figs and olives. Dust drifted lazily through shafts of golden light, while philosophers argued beneath shaded colonnades. Everything ordinary, everything familiar. Then her gaze met his, only briefly, yet the moment unfolded strangely within him, not dramatic, not violent. The Greeks did not always imagine Eros's arrow as pain. Sometimes it felt more like awakening, as though an invisible veil lifted quietly from the world. Colors deepened, time slowed, and suddenly another human presence seemed illuminated with impossible clarity against the vast movement of life. Alexian remembers standing motionless while the market continued flowing around him. The scent of crushed mint beneath sandaled feet, the distant ringing of bronze tools, pigeons rising into the bright air above the square. Yet within himself, stillness. The ancient Greeks often described love as both sweetness and suffering intertwined together, so completely they could no longer be separated. Like honey mixed into dark wine, like moonlight touching storm clouds, because longing carries beauty precisely through its uncertainty, and uncertainty creates restlessness. Night after night, Alexian finds himself wandering mentally toward the same thoughts. Does she remember him? Will their paths cross again? Was the moment meaningful or imagined entirely? These questions drift endlessly through his mind, while the stars travel slowly across the heavens above Athens. He begins noticing strange changes within himself. Music affects him more deeply. The scent of olive trees after rain suddenly fills him with unexplained melancholy. Poetry, once dismissed casually, now feels painfully beautiful. Even silence changes, especially silence, because now every quiet moment leaves room for longing to emerge. The Greeks understood that love alters perception itself. A person struck by Eros no longer inhabits the world exactly as before. Everything becomes charged with emotional presence. A doorway, a street corner, a fragment of song overheard near the harbor. Ordinary places become sacred through association with memory, and so love begins quietly shaping reality from within. The night deepens further. Alexian walks slowly through the courtyard garden, while moonlight pools softly across the marble floor. Olive branches sway gently overhead. The fountain water continues its endless movement. Far away, beyond the city walls, a dog barks once before silence returns again. He pauses beside a low stone bench warmed faintly by the lingering memory of daylight. Then he lifts his gaze toward the stars. The constellations move slowly above him. The Greeks believed the heavens themselves reflected hidden order within existence. Yet standing beneath them now, Alexian feels not order, but surrender. The realization arrives gradually. Love cannot be controlled through discipline or logic alone. One does not decide calmly to fall beneath the influence of Eros. It happens, quietly, irrevocably, like dawn appearing over the sea, whether mortals wish for it or not. And perhaps this is why the Greeks called it divine madness, because love bypasses the carefully guarded walls people build around themselves. It enters through unseen doors. It softens certainty. It transforms ordinary human beings into restless souls, wandering sleepless beneath the stars, asking questions with no clear answers. Yet despite the ache of uncertainty, the Greeks did not entirely fear this madness, because within it existed transcendence. To love deeply was to glimpse something larger than individual existence, a connection capable of dissolving loneliness, even briefly, a reminder that the soul longs endlessly toward beauty, intimacy, and understanding. The breeze cools further as the hours drift toward dawn. Alexian finally returns to his couch beside the open courtyard. The marble beneath him still carries traces of night chill. Above, the stars slowly begin fading one by one into the pale approaching light of morning. Still sleep does not fully come, but neither does despair, only longing, quiet, endless longing moving gently through the chambers of the heart, like tidewater beneath moonlight. And somewhere beyond the waking horizon of ancient Greece, invisible and eternal, Eros continues wandering through the world with silent footsteps, awakening souls one by one beneath the endless turning heavens. There is something deeply human about the desire to leave words behind, a name carved quietly into stone, a sentence written carefully beneath candlelight, a confession hidden within the folds of a letter never meant for public eyes. Across thousands of years, empires rise and disappear, temples crumble into dust, and entire cities vanish beneath earth and sea, yet small traces of longing often remain. A scratched message upon a wall, a fragment of ink upon brittle parchment, proof that someone, somewhere in the ancient world, loved deeply enough to fear being forgotten. And nowhere did these quiet traces feel more haunting than in the sleeping cities of ancient Greece. Imagine the hour now, long after midnight. Athens rests beneath a vast canopy of stars. The noise of the agora has faded entirely. Bronze workshop fires have dimmed to glowing embers. Tavern doors stand closed. Even the stray dogs wandering narrow alleyways move slowly now, softened by exhaustion and night air. Moonlight washes gently across the city. Whitewashed walls shimmer pale silver beneath the heavens. Olive trees growing beside quiet courtyards cast long trembling shadows across stone pathways whenever the wind stirs their branches. Everything feels suspended, softened, as though the city itself drifts somewhere between waking and dream. The air smells faintly of cooling marble, olive oil, distant seawater, and wood smoke lingering from evening hearth fires now nearly extinguished. Somewhere far away, beyond the sleeping rooftops, waves continue touching the shores of the Aegean Sea with endless rhythmic patience. And through one narrow alleyway walks a young man named Nicandros. His sandals move quietly over worn stone polished smooth by generations of footsteps. A dark wool cloak rests loosely around his shoulders against the coolness of the night. In one hand he carries a small oil lamp. Its flame trembles gently whenever the breeze slips between the walls. He walks carefully, not from fear exactly, but because nighttime in ancient Greece possessed an intimacy daylight never allowed. During the day, cities belonged to crowds, merchants, philosophers, children, travelers. Voices filled every corner of public life. But at night, the city became personal again, private. The hidden inner world of human longing emerged most clearly beneath moonlight. Nicandros turns slowly into an even narrower passage between white stone buildings. Here the sounds of the city feel distant, muted. Only the faint rustling of olive leaves overhead and the occasional drip of water from a nearby fountain break the silence. The wall beside him glows softly beneath the pale lunar light, and there, hidden partly beneath creeping ivy and years of weathered limewash, faint markings already cover the stone. Names, initials, fragments of messages scratched quietly into the surface by countless forgotten hands. Some almost erased by time, others still visible. A simple sentence, "I remember her." Another, half worn away by centuries of rain, "Your eyes remain with me." The Greeks left traces of themselves everywhere, especially lovers. Sometimes the messages were carved into public walls, sometimes onto ostraca, broken pieces of pottery used for quick writing when parchment proved too costly. Sometimes upon wax tablets or fragile papyrus scrolls, folded carefully and hidden inside homes, temples, or beneath sleeping cushions. Most have vanished now, yet enough survive to remind us of something profound. Ancient people loved with astonishing intensity, not abstractly, not symbolically, but personally, tenderly, and often very quietly. Nicandros kneels slowly near the wall. The stone beneath his fingertips feels cool and rough. Tiny grains of marble dust cling softly against his skin. From within his cloak he removes a small metal stylus. The bronze catches faint golden light from the oil lamp resting beside him. For a moment he hesitates. His breathing slows. The Greeks understood the strange vulnerability of writing affection into permanence. Spoken words dissolve immediately into air, but written words remain, or at least they hope to remain. The stylus touches the wall at last. A soft scratching sound emerges against the silence. Slow, deliberate, tiny fragments of pale stone fall gently onto the ground beneath his hand. He carves carefully, not an elaborate poem, not dramatic declarations, only a name. Thalia. The letters emerge gradually into the marble surface, uneven yet deeply intentional. The act itself feels sacred somehow. To carve the name of another person into stone beneath moonlight. To leave proof behind that they existed within the chambers of your heart. Nicandros pauses after finishing. The alley remains silent around him. The lamp flame flickers softly, and for a long moment he simply stares at the name, Thalia. He remembers the first time he saw her weeks earlier near the Agora fountain at dusk. The scent of figs and mint drifting through warm evening air, sunlight fading gold against the marble colonnades, her hands lowering a clay water vessel carefully toward the fountain basin. Small moments, ordinary moments, yet somehow capable of altering the entire architecture of a human soul. The Greeks often believed memory itself possessed sacred power. To remember someone deeply was a kind of devotion, and writing became an attempt to preserve emotion against the endless erosion of time. Nicandros lowers himself against the wall beneath the olive shadows. The city breathes quietly around him. Somewhere nearby, a shutter creaks softly in the wind. Far above, stars move slowly over the sleeping rooftops of Athens. Then, from another fold within his cloak, he removes something more delicate, a letter, small, carefully folded. The papyrus edges curl slightly from repeated handling. He unfolds it slowly beside the lamp. The material feels fragile beneath his fingers, dry and whisper-thin like autumn leaves. Ink glimmers darkly across the surface. Not formal writing, personal writing, intimate, the kind meant only for one pair of eyes. Ancient Greek letters often carried enormous emotional weight because distance itself felt heavier then. Journeys lasted months. Ships vanished beyond horizons uncertainly. War separated lovers for seasons or years. And so written words became precious extensions of presence itself. To receive a letter was to hold another person's thoughts physically within your hands. Nicandros traces the edge of the papyrus gently. He has rewritten this letter many times already, too many times. The first versions sounded too uncertain, the second too formal, the third revealed too much. Now only this final copy remains, simple, honest. The candlelight trembles faintly while he reads silently through the lines once more. He writes of ordinary things. The sound of rain upon the agora roof tiles, a dream in which he saw her walking beside the sea. The strange emptiness he now feels, moving through familiar streets without encountering her unexpectedly. The Greeks understood that true longing often reveals itself through tiny details rather than grand speeches. A doorway remembered, a voice overheard once, the way afternoon sunlight touched someone's face. Nicandros folds the letter again slowly, very carefully, as though rough movement might somehow damage the feelings hidden within the fragile papyrus itself. Tomorrow, before dawn, a servant traveling toward another district of the city will carry it discreetly. Perhaps she will read it beside her window while morning light enters softly through linen curtains. Perhaps she will press the parchment briefly against her chest afterward before hiding it away from curious eyes. Or perhaps fear will prevent any reply at all. Love in ancient Greece often unfolded within uncertainty. Yet still people wrote. Still they carved names into walls. Still they left fragments of themselves behind for others to discover. Because longing always seeks expression somehow. The night deepens further around Nicandros. The oil lamp burns lower now, its glow softer and more golden against the stone alley walls. He rises slowly to his feet. Before leaving, he looks once more toward the carved name hidden beneath ivy and moonlight. Already it feels ancient somehow, as though it belonged not merely to this night, but to every night lovers have ever wandered sleepless beneath the stars. And perhaps that is true, because somewhere, thousands of years ago, another soul stood exactly where he stands now, breathing the same cool Mediterranean air, listening to the same distant sea, carving another beloved name into stone with trembling hands, while hoping desperately that love might outlive silence. Nicandros lifts the lamp once more, then he disappears quietly into the sleeping city. Behind him, the alleyway returns to stillness. Moonlight rests softly upon whitewashed walls. Olive shadows sway gently across the carved stone. And there in the silent heart of ancient Greece, hidden beneath stars and ivy and centuries yet to come, fragile words remain waiting in the darkness, carrying the echo of human longing through time itself. Night descended slowly over ancient Greece, not suddenly, not all at once. The final light of sunset lingered long across the horizon, spreading deep shades of amber, rose, and fading gold over the sea, before surrendering gradually to the blue hush of evening. The marble temples atop distant hills still carried traces of warmth from the vanished sun. Olive groves darkened softly beneath gathering twilight. Along narrow stone streets, household lamps began appearing one by one behind open windows, like small stars awakening across the sleeping city. And somewhere within this descending evening, preparations quietly began for a wedding procession. In ancient Greece, marriage was not merely a legal union, nor simply a celebration. It was a sacred crossing, a movement from one life into another, a moment suspended delicately between farewell and beginning. And nowhere did this transformation feel more beautiful than during the procession itself. The slow journey through the night, when the bride departed her childhood home, beneath the glow of torches and stars. Imagine now the city after sunset. Athens rests beneath a velvet sky, slowly deepening into indigo. The air has cooled gently after the heat of the day. A soft breeze drifts through the streets carrying the scent of olive wood smoke, distant seawater, and night-blooming jasmine spilling from courtyard gardens, hidden behind pale stone walls. The agora stands mostly quiet now. Market stalls sit empty beneath folded linen awnings. Bronze scales and clay jars rest undisturbed in shadow. Only a few late wanderers move quietly through the fading light, while above them the first stars begin appearing between temple rooftops. But farther uphill, near the residential quarters beneath the Acropolis, warm light flickers brightly from one particular household. Guests gather there, soft conversation drifts into the evening air. Laughter rises gently before dissolving once more into calm anticipation. Inside the home, preparations unfold slowly. Oil lamps burn along the walls, their flames glowing amber against painted frescoes depicting vines, doves, and flowing rivers. The scent of myrrh and cedarwood incense lingers richly through the rooms. Women move carefully through the household, adjusting linens, arranging garlands, smoothing folds of fabric with reverent hands, and seated quietly near the inner courtyard fountain waits the bride. Her name is Eleni. Tonight, she leaves behind one life forever. Moonlight filters softly through the open courtyard above her, silvering the edges of the marble floor. Nearby, water flows continuously from a carved lion-head fountain into a shallow basin filled with floating flower petals. Eleni's wedding garments shimmer faintly beneath the oil lamps. Fine linen drapes gracefully around her body, in pale folds, soft as sea foam. A delicate veil rests over her dark hair, woven lightly with tiny white blossoms of myrtle and wild jasmine, whose fragrance surrounds her like a living memory of spring. Gold bracelets circle her wrists, not excessive, not ostentatious. Simple symbols of blessing and continuity passed through generations of women before her. She sits very still, her hands folded softly within her lap. Around her, voices murmur gently, yet inwardly, another silence unfolds, a private silence. The Greeks understood that weddings carried melancholy alongside joy, because every beginning quietly contains an ending within it. Tonight, Eleni leaves the home where she once slept as a child, listening to rain upon the roof tiles. She leaves behind familiar walls, familiar footsteps, familiar mornings scented with bread and olive oil, drifting from the kitchen hearth. Tomorrow, another house will become her own, another courtyard, another rhythm of life. And although marriage was celebrated publicly, the emotional crossing itself remained deeply personal. Outside, the stars multiply above the city. The sky deepens further into rich midnight blue. Then at last, the torches are lit. One by one, pine torches flare alive in the darkness beyond the doorway. Golden firelight spills suddenly across the street, warm and flickering against whitewashed stone walls. Smoke rises upward in pale twisting ribbons, carrying the sharp resin-rich scent of burning pine into the cool night air. The procession is ready to begin. Friends and relatives gather slowly outside the house, holding the torches aloft. Their flames sway gently whenever the breeze passes through the narrow streets, casting long moving shadows across the stone pathways. The effect feels dreamlike. Firelight dances against marble columns, against olive branches overhead, against the folds of linen garments drifting softly through the darkness. Somewhere nearby, musicians begin playing quietly upon the lyre and flute. Not loud music, gentle music, measured, ceremonial. The melody moves through the night like flowing water. Then comes the singing, soft at first, almost like humming. The ancient hymeneal songs sung during Greek weddings, voices rising together slowly in calm rhythmic harmony. Friends of the bride sing blessings into the night as the procession forms around her. The songs are old, older than memory, their melodies carried through generations beneath these same stars. The words speak of Aphrodite's grace, of harmony between souls, of peaceful homes and enduring devotion. The music drifts upward into the darkness, while torch smoke curls toward the heavens, and finally Eleni emerges from the doorway. The entire procession seems to still slightly at her appearance. Torchlight touches her veil with trembling gold. The linen of her garments glows softly amber against the deep blue night surrounding the street. Her expression is calm, yet within her eyes rests something vast and difficult to name. Hope, fear, tenderness, the solemn understanding that life itself is changing quietly around her. Two women step beside her gently. One adjusts the veil near her shoulders, while the other places a sprig of olive leaves into her hand, a symbol of peace, endurance, and blessing. Ahead waits the wooden chariot, prepared for the journey. Its wheels are decorated with woven garlands of ivy and white flowers. Bronze lanterns hang from its sides, casting warm pools of flickering light upon the ground beneath. The horses stand patiently in the darkness, their breath faintly visible within the cool evening air. Eleni approaches slowly. Every movement feels ceremonial now, measured, sacred, the rustling of linen, the soft scrape of sandals upon stone, the distant singing continuing steadily beneath the stars. When she finally steps onto the chariot, the procession begins moving through the city. Slowly, very slowly, torchbearers walk ahead, illuminating the narrow streets in shifting gold and shadow. Pine smoke drifts upward continuously behind them. Friends and family follow alongside the chariot, singing softly, while musicians weave gentle melodies through the warm night air. The city itself seems transformed beneath the procession's light. Ordinary streets become luminous corridors of moving fire. Shuttered windows glow faintly as curious eyes watch quietly from within darkened homes. Olive trees lining the roads cast intricate shadows that sway across the stone like rippling water. Above everything stretches the immense Greek sky filled with stars. The procession winds carefully through Athens, past sleeping courtyards scented with jasmine, past silent fountains glimmering beneath moonlight, past small shrines where tiny oil lamps burn before weathered statues of the gods. And all the while the hymeneal songs continue softly through the darkness, their rhythm steady, almost hypnotic, a blessing carried upon human voices into the night. Inside the chariot, Eleni remains silent, not from sadness alone, but because certain moments in life become too large for ordinary speech. She watches the city pass slowly around her through the veil, the familiar streets of childhood now appearing distant already beneath the torchlight. And ahead, somewhere beyond the winding roads and sleeping rooftops, waits the home where another life begins. The Greeks believed marriage joined not merely two individuals, but two destinies, two separate paths woven carefully together beneath the watchful eyes of the gods. And tonight, beneath drifting smoke and starlight, that weaving quietly unfolds. At one point the procession passes near the edge of the city, where the sea becomes visible far below the cliffs. The Aegean glows silver-black beneath the moon. Waves move endlessly against the shore in soft rhythmic patterns. The wind rising from the water cools the faces of the travelers gently as they continue forward through the darkness. Eleni lifts her gaze briefly toward the stars overhead. For one suspended moment, everything feels impossibly ancient. The torches, the songs, the sea. The awareness that countless others before her crossed similar nights, carrying the same mixture of uncertainty and devotion within their hearts. The procession continues, slowly, patiently, until finally distant lanterns appear ahead. Her new home. Warm light glows from the doorway. Figures wait quietly outside beneath hanging olive branches and garlands. The singing softens. The musicians lower their melodies almost into silence, and as the chariot rolls gently to a stop beneath the torchlight, the night itself seems to pause around them, because this moment matters, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. A threshold has been crossed. Two separate lives now begin the long, mysterious journey of becoming shared. The torches crackle softly in the darkness. Smoke drifts upward into the endless stars. And somewhere beyond the sleeping city of ancient Greece, the sea continues breathing against the shore beneath the eternal night sky. Now, the night has grown deeper still, and everything begins to soften, not abruptly, not with finality, but slowly, like the last glow of oil lamps fading gently into dawn that has not yet arrived. Across ancient Greece, the stories we have walked through together begin to settle back into silence. The agora grows quiet again, the marble streets empty. The temples stand still beneath the stars, their columns pale and patient in the moonlight. Olive trees continue their soft, endless movement in the night breeze. And the Aegean Sea, vast and unchanging, keeps breathing against the shores of the world, with a rhythm older than memory itself. Empires rise and fall. Cities grow and disappear into dust carried by wind and time. Athens, Sparta, the coastal sanctuaries, the hidden alleyways where names were carved into stone, the temples where incense once curled into the night sky, all of it eventually becomes history. Even the brightest torches fade, even the loudest voices dissolve into silence, even the most carefully written letters become fragments carried forward by time. And yet, something remains, something quietly unbroken. Because beneath all of it, the human heart continues to search. Still, always. The same search that existed thousands of years ago beneath these same stars is still here now, in this moment. The search for connection, for recognition, for the feeling that somewhere, somehow, another soul understands the silent language of your own. Tonight, as you listen, the world around you becomes softer. The room you are in begins to feel quieter. The edges of thought begin to loosen gently. Breathing slows without effort. Time itself feels less sharp, and somewhere far beyond the boundaries of this present moment, ancient Greece is still there, not as a place lost completely, but as a memory woven into the fabric of human longing, because the truth is simple, and the Greeks understood it deeply. The stars above us have not changed. The same constellations that shimmered over Athens now shimmer above you, over your quiet night, over your resting thoughts, over the stillness of your space. Orion still rises, the Milky Way still stretches across the sky like spilled light. The moon still moves slowly across the heavens, touching the earth with silver calm. And beneath it all, human beings still fall in love, still wonder, still search, still feel the quiet ache of connection and distance intertwined. You may imagine now the agora at night once more, empty stone pathways, warm dust resting after centuries of footsteps, a fountain dripping slowly into a marble basin under starlight, a carved name on a hidden wall, still holding on to the memory of someone who once cared enough to leave it behind. And somewhere in that silence, you can almost feel it, that same ancient rhythm, the same timeless pulse of life, moving gently through everything. Now even the stories begin to drift away, not disappearing, just softening, like waves retreating slowly from the shore, like torchlight fading into darkness without urgency, like thoughts dissolving gently at the edge of sleep. You do not need to hold on to anything now, not the markets of Athens, not the temples of Aphrodite, not the symposiums filled with wine and quiet philosophy, not the torchlit procession moving slowly through the night, not even the names carved into stone or whispered beneath oil lamps. All of it can rest now. All of it can become still, and you can simply be here, in this moment, in this quiet. Let the world feel a little more distant now. Let your thoughts grow softer, lighter, less defined, like sand gently settling beneath calm water. There is nothing you need to follow anymore, nothing you need to remember, only this steady, quiet presence. This feeling of warmth and distance blending together. The ancient world does not truly leave. It simply fades into the background of consciousness, like a dream you once had, but still somehow feel inside your chest. And as you rest here now, you may notice how everything slows further, how even your sense of time becomes softer at the edges, how your thoughts no longer move forward so quickly, but begin to float instead. Gently, quietly, like leaves drifting across still water beneath a night sky. The Greeks would have called this moment sacred in its own way, not because something dramatic is happening, but because nothing is being forced anymore. Everything is allowed to simply be. The night continues outside. The world continues turning, but here, everything is calm, everything is still. And you can let yourself drift now, just a little further, just a little deeper, into quiet, into rest. into the soft space between waking and sleep. There is nothing left to hold, nothing left to solve. Only the gentle rhythm of breath, in and out, slowly, softly, like waves touching the shore in the far distance of a forgotten coastline. And as sleep begins to approach, very gently, very naturally, you might imagine one final image: a calm Greek night, a sky filled with ancient stars, a sea that never stops moving, and beneath it all, a quiet understanding that everything you felt, everything you heard, everything you traveled through in these stories is still here within you in some softer form. Not as memory, but as atmosphere, as calm, as stillness. And now there is nothing more to do, nothing more to follow, only rest, only quiet, only the slow fading of thought into gentle darkness. Let sleep come easily now. Let it arrive without effort. Let it carry you softly into deep, uninterrupted rest beneath the same eternal stars that watched over ancient Greece and still watch over you now.